Hi friends, this is Trish and welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today we have an awesome guest. Her name is Constance and she is a blogger and a podcaster at Truth and Fire. She is also an incredible educator and she has had so many different roles. She has been a college teacher, she's been a tutor, a substitute, and currently she is teaching high school math in the DC area at a private school. So we're going to learn so much about her today, and it's also going to be her last year in education. So we're going to find out some reasons why she is transitioning out. So how are you doing today, Constance?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much. And you have a really awesome name that I kind of struggled to say. So can you tell us about your name?
Okay, so what you see, guys, on the screen is my pen name for my blog and my podcast. It's Veriteetfeu. It is French for truth and fire. So it came about in a weird way. I couldn't find truth and fire that wasn't already taken on social media. So I went with French because I am a Francophile. But other than that, it's just truth and fire in French.
Love it. That's awesome. Well, we kind of found each other because we have had a similar nightmare experience with teaching in private school.
Oh, yeah.
And I always like to take, a time to give like public service announcements to teachers. Sometimes they think, oh my gosh, I'm going to leave the frying pan of public education and not realizing that they're jumping into the fire of private school teaching. So if you don't mind, just going to kind of jump in. So I know for me, one of my biggest shocks was the behavior of the students. I thought they would be sweet and kind and cooperative and studious, but they had a huge attitude right out the gate and they were testing me right out the gate. Did you have a similar experience, or what were the actual kids like?
So here's the thing. This is the thing that actually launched the craziness of my experience there. So the students, by and large, were pretty good. And I have to say this, of all the students that I've taught, with the exception of my Sunday school kids, of all the students I've taught from my job, from the vantage point of my career, that sixth grade class was the best group of students I've ever worked with. However, because I wasn't there the previous year, at that school, the teachers get together and they decide who's going to go into whose homeroom. And because that position was vacant, the veteran teacher she was by the time I got there, she was a second year teacher. So I think she realized if I don't take charge of this, I'm going to be with the administrator's son in my classroom. So they moved him to my class, or whoever the teacher would be. And it happened to be me. So I had, this is crazy. The students were well behaved, but the main problem kids, if you will, were put in my class. So I had the assistant dean's son in my class, or vice dean, I can't remember his exact title. And then I had a young lady in the class who was beginning to explore her identity. And so she would, and questioning Christianity. So she would go out in the Bible and she would go out and just say the craziest things to her classmates. So I had to deal with her and the other student. However, she wasn't the issue that drove me out of there. It was the son of the administrator, because basically they had taken some type of assessment, and I don't know if you know how you project your computer, your screen to your smart board. And I think I made a passing comment like, oh man, I almost made a mistake and put everybody's grade on the screen or something like that. So the administrator's son goes, no, do it. Put everybody's grade on the screen. And I was like, oh, like, no. And he's just like, I bet if I told my dad, I bet you'll do it, or something like that. It was weird. But he was saying something about going to get his dad. But I'm like, see, clearly your dad wouldn't agree with me putting everyone's grades on the screen. I thought that was weird. So he made a comment like, if my dad were here, but he was just making these little comments about how his dad runs everything and he gets what he wants because his dad is who he is. And so I made a comment to him like, you cannot threaten me with your father. So I said, your dad and I are on the same team. I'm saying all these things. And this young man was arguing back with me. And so during recess, because we're not supposed to take away recess, apparently, who knew? I thought I could keep him in for recess, but that didn't happen. But what I did do is I went to him during recess and I said, you're going to come with me to go talk to your dad. And he has this whole meltdown. Talk to my mom instead. Call my mom instead. I'm like, okay. So I take him to talk to his father, but knowing that he may feel intimidated to share what had happened in the classroom with me there, I said, I'll step away and let them talk. I don't know what he told his dad. His dad communicated something to me about how he said that he wanted to see his grade and you wouldn't show it to him. And that's when he said, you know, I bet you show me my grade if my dad made you show my grade. I'm like, it was weird. But anyway, so from that point forward, the dad seemed like he second guessed everything that I would say about his son. Later that same day, his son just totally acted out in class, and his classmates were upset because he was disturbed. This is how well behaved those kids were. Instead of laughing with him and joining in with him, they were annoyed because he was interrupting their education. And of course, a lot of that got back to their parents. And so the parents are now questioning my classroom management skills. And then my principal, who was okay, how do I explain it? My boss, who was the principal of the middle school, he was the subordinate of the kid's dad. So basically, he was new to the school. So he was kind of in a bad situation to really kind of have my back because that's his boss. So ultimately, he didn't have my back. Of course, the assistant dean didn't have my back. And the dean, who was never around, I don't know where he was, probably fundraising or something, which is fine, didn't have my back. So I found myself throughout the school year just being demoralized a little bit over and over and over again, just through this one incident that seemed to just blow up. And so the dad would, you know, the way he spoke to me in emails just was very condescending, like he second guessed anything I said. He was breaking his own, the school's policy about giving students copies of tests after they take at that school. When they take a test, the students the parents can come in and see the grade and see what the child did, but you cannot send the test home because I guess the thought is to use the test again or something. I don't know. So the dad is asking me for copies of the tests and all this. And so I'm like, well, what do I do? Because the policy says I can't give this to you, but he's demanding that I give it to him. So I don't know. That was weird. But who do I go to figure out if that's okay other than the dean, who I never see? So I'm just like, you know, so I give him a copy of the test. This student was one of very few students who pretty much failed everything, and it was my fault because he was failing. There was an incident where he had missing homework, and my general policy with late work is I don't accept it. I want students to be, you know, to learn about, you know, just executive functioning, meeting deadlines and things like that. But I wasn't allowed to do that there. Okay, that's fine. So I had to take his late work. And as I'm looking at the work, it's, you know, very neatly written and it's just not his handwriting. Oh yeah, my mom did that. He's telling me this. My mom did that. So I go to my boss and I'm like, hey, he said his mom did his work. Oh, he's just a kid. You know how students just say any old thing, you know, da 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 da. So, but I can't escalate this over his head because that's the kid's dad. So I'm just like, I was just in the craziest situation. So long story short, what ended up happening with my experience there, and I can get into more detail, you know, depending on the questions and stuff. But what ended up happening is the mother of the child got involved. And so she would also second guess anything I did. A lot of the parents, either they didn't work, the mothers, I should say, a lot of the mothers there either didn't work or they worked at the school. So this particular parent, I don't think she worked at the school, but she was home. So anytime I would input grades, she would like email me right away, like 2 seconds later, hey, he got a C on this. I didn't know he had a test. Yeah, I put it on the calendar 2 weeks ago. You should put, and I get an email from my administrator days later, you should start putting recurring events on the calendar every day until the event, until the test or until the assessment. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. When I go to the doctor, set an appointment, I know to look at my schedule every day or, you know, look at a glance every month or something like that, or every week to know what I have to do. Their idea was in the system we were using to let parents know about upcoming tests is that we have to do recurring. If we have a test in 2 weeks, the day that I assign the test, I have to put on the calendar to say a test is in such and such date up until the date. It was the craziest thing. But anyway, so that mother did not care for me too much. And so somehow she got to the other moms, and another mom who really liked me mistakenly told me about this chat that they had. So they created this chat and they're all talking about my effectiveness as a teacher and the whole fact that I taught Title I was coming back up. Like, oh, she's only effective with Title I kids. She doesn't know what she's doing. So this whole thing. So my professionalism was questioned. My competency was questioned. I was more so treated as a babysitter. And one thing about me, I do have I'm very vocal. I do tend to stand up for myself and what I believe is right. And I had to learn quickly that if I wanted to survive at that school, I would have to fall in line. And I knew I wouldn't be able to do that when I saw how I was being treated when I didn't really there was no real reason. It was just kind of like being bullied. But it wasn't coming from the the students, it was coming from the parents, and maybe a couple of teachers, which was my co-teacher, who was only there a year before I got there, but she had less experience than I was, but she was the lead teacher for our, I don't know, whatever. But she was the lead teacher. And so she questioned everything I did. She just walked into my classroom whenever she felt like it. She would set up my room. There was no conversation had. She just did whatever. So there was just a lot of feeling disrespected, disregarded, questioned, micromanaged, things like that. I had gotten a performance review earlier in the year. I got no feedback. That information. I'd send an email to my principal like, hey, I never got feedback, never got response. And then towards the end of the year, I get a performance review, and all of a sudden I get this scathing review like, oh, classroom management is not there. There was a student who wasn't engaged, which was the administrator's son, who wasn't engaged in the lesson. So I should have done all these extra, magic tricks to get him to want to be involved. So that was another review. But I humbly responded and said, hey, well, maybe, maybe there is something I missed. I can look into some professional development and leaning on my colleagues here to see, if there's a way to kind of improve these areas. And then the next thing I know, I'm getting an email asking me not to resign from the role for that school year, but to send an email to them telling them that, to resign. It was weird to resign from the role, but I was going to complete the school year. I don't know if I understood that. But in either case, around springtime, you get those contract renewal or interest, what is it called? Intent, letters of intent. So they were asking all of us, do you plan on coming back next school year? And I think they sent ours out like in December. That was pretty early. But I said, sure, at this point, maybe it's because it's a pandemic year. Maybe it's because I'm new here. Maybe it's because I'm expecting too much. Let me check myself. But, as it stands now, I would come back next year. And then spring break comes, I get nothing. Everyone's like, yeah, did you get your contract? Yeah, I got my contract. I get nothing. So I don't get a contract. My boss doesn't talk to me about returning or anything of that nature. And then I just get an email asking me to resign from my role. And I'm like, why would I do that? It was the most random thing. But yeah, like I said, I can ramble on and on and on, but it was just basically, it was more so bullying from the parents. And I believe because of the connections that the main parent had, because her husband is like second in charge at the school, I really had nowhere to go to kind of plead my case. And I don't know, I just, when it came to the point of me being able to plead my case, no one listened to what I was trying to say. So ultimately, I got forced out of the school in a way that I think what happened was they sent out an email on I can't remember the exact date. I'll just give a general date to show context. So maybe April 8th, they're saying that as of April 12th, no one can take a day off. It's the end of the school year. We need to. So it was like that. But I had leave that I needed to take, and I could never take days off because they had field trips planned and all these things. So the subs were already allotted. At that school, there's a pool of subs within the community, so they don't go out. And so the pool of subs were already allotted to all the other teachers that were going on field trips and things like that. So I never got a chance to take my time. So I ended up taking another day. I take a personal day or something like that to go get dental work, much needed dental work. And I go and my mouth is swollen. I can barely talk. I get a call from the school. I can barely talk, but I answer, and my boss is like, where are you? What's going on? I'm like, I am at the dentist. I, put in a leave request and all that good stuff. So basically his complaint was that you weren't supposed to take any time off. It's the end of the school year. Everybody understood that. So he used that against me. Another thing was, the issue I was having with the son. So at this point, before with the mom doing the homework, kids just say anything. Now, all of a sudden, because of the issue I'm having with the son says this, so therefore this. Wait, what? How does what he has to say now count when it didn't count when I brought something to the table? So there were just all these little moving parts. And so I ended up having a series of meetings, impromptu meetings, by the way. They pulled me into meetings, just pulled me out of my classroom, and were putting people in my room and, giving me a moment's notice. But somehow I had the wherewithal to know to take my computer and to record, because I was in a state where that was allowed. With that. So just full disclosure, it was legal. I recorded the meetings because I wanted to make sure that because I just had been gaslit the whole school year. Politically, if you will, I'm pretty, I don't consider myself Republican or conservative in that sense. But if you're asking me to give you a definitive answer, I would probably say more conservative. So, and knowing how I feel about things like CRT and all that, I'm trying my best not to scream racism time I'm trying really hard to not do that. But I didn't, and everyone around me is like, nope, this looks like racism. And I don't know if I think it was that. I do think there was a cultural mismatch because my co-teacher would complain about the noise is too loud in her classroom. My students can't think. She was all about keeping everything quiet, whereas I used music. We did a lot of kinesthetic activities, things where we moved around and all that. So for her, I was disturbing the peace. And for my kids, they were learning and they were having a great time. So that was interesting. So all these different aspects at that school that I feel like could have been done differently just wasn't. But like I said, I got pulled into an impromptu meeting. They were following up on an email they sent me about resigning. And I'm like, why would I resign? Like, I'm not going anywhere. Are you firing me? Because if you are, like, on what grounds? And they didn't have grounds. And so I'm asking them all these questions, like, what is the problem? But ultimately, the issue that I believe was going on is the issue with the son. And then there were some things that the school was asking me to do that I didn't agree with changing grades. I got a call. My boss always worked on phone calls, called me instead of emailing me. So he called me one night. I was heading to my other job to teach ESL. And he's like, hey, can you go back into your grade book and update the grades? And so he basically wanted me to remove 40 points from my test was based on 100 points. But he wanted me to make a curve, basically. The students didn't do so well, but it was also because the students were not challenged to, and this is my perspective, of course, but the students in previous years had not been challenged to think critically or analytically. It was basically like matching, if fill in the blanks, things like that. So if you give them a test and if you say a verb is a word that shows action, and you give them a test that says, Sam ran across the street, underline the verb. They told me that was a bad test because I taught the kids that a verb is a word that shows action. I should have given them a test that says a verb is a word that shows blank. And I'm like, are you serious? So it was that kind of stuff I was dealing with. So I'm like, I don't know if what I'm explaining sounds coherent, and it probably sounds less dramatic than it was to me, but there was just so much gaslighting going on. My boss was a former pastor, so he spoke to me very pastorally, and like he really cared about me as a whole person. So I'm sharing with him like how I feel like a failure when I leave at the end of the day, because I'm doing everything I know to do, and I'm still not getting through to XYZ, which is the son of the administrator. I'm still not getting through to him. His mom is calling me an ineffective teacher. They're asking me to do things like I need to clean out his backpack for him. I need to organize his folders for him. Before he takes a test, I need to put it on the calendar over and over again. I have to remind him, hey, make sure he writes it down in his agenda. If he doesn't write it down, go back to him. They're asking me to do all these extra things. And on one level, I understand it when it comes to differentiated learning and just making accommodations. But this was beyond that. This was like, it was just beyond that. And so we ended up having a meeting, I recall, with the administrator, his wife. His son wasn't there. And my boss, who was not invited to the meeting, invited himself to the meeting because he said he was there to make sure I was protected. But he actually was there to get intel to take back to the dean of schools to move towards this ultimate, I guess, ploy to push me out of the school. Because again, they had no grounds to fire me. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything illegal, immoral, anything, but they just had to nitpick and find something about me to get me out of there. So I'm at this meeting and they said, can you tell us, in all honesty, do you really believe that this student is a D student? And I said, yes. I said, I believe so. I said, I believe he can do better. But where he is right now, his focus is not on school. He's all about football, blah, blah, blah. That was his favorite sport. That's where he's at. So he has a D only because you guys are making me change his grades, inflate them, because he really has an F, and that it was pearls were clutched and feigning happened and like all these dramatics, like, and I'm sitting there like, what did I say? Because I'm like, you don't see this? You don't know your own child, So all these things were happening, but it all centered around one student. But because of that and because of their influence, they found a small band of, catty women who were willing to go along with it. And then they too started finding ways to nitpick about things I did with their students. But by and large, there were parents who really respected what I did. I taught chapel in class. I did a devotional. So from a spiritual standpoint and teaching at a Christian school, the parents respected what I was doing. And for the most part, the parents loved it. But I had this little faction over here who did not appreciate how I felt or how I was treating, or in their view, the administrator's son. And it just became this whole thing. So they had to band together to come up with a strategy to push me out. So basically the second meeting that I had to record as well is they're, telling me basically to like, hey, if you resign, we'll write you a letter of recommendation to go anywhere else. So again, this is telling me you have nothing on me. You're telling me to leave, but you, what am I resigning from? I refuse to resign when I didn't, I'm not quitting. I don't want to quit. I'll finish out my contract, but I'm not quitting. And so that's what they were saying. Like, yeah, you can still finish out your contract. You're just giving us a letter to let you know that you're not returning. I said, well, I can just say I'm not returning next school year. I don't need to do a whole letter. Like, just, whatever. So, that didn't work. They were still upset with me about not quitting. And so after the whole dental work situation, which they didn't believe I truly had done, because the way they were questioning me at the meeting, how's your tooth? So you just had to go, but I had gotten dental work earlier in the year, and the doctor didn't do something. So the filling and all that stuff didn't do what it was supposed to do. So I had to go back. And I definitely have the medical records to prove it if it ever became an issue. But I go to this third meeting, and at this point, I invite my pastor to come because I needed someone to kind of like have my back. And he came. And so they told me at that meeting that they had hired a full-time, a long-term sub to finish out my classes for the year, and that I was allowed to work from home for the rest of the school year. And I was like, okay. So now but they put a proposal in place. Basically, you still work here, but you're not allowed on campus anymore. I couldn't even go upstairs to get my belongings. I couldn't get anything because they're like, we told you that you couldn't take the day off, and you took the day. So they found something. You took that day off anyway. And well, actually the leave was it approved? I don't remember, but I know that I did the proper channels. And I explained to them that the reason why I couldn't take it off within that window is because, one, you guys just dropped this on us like 4 days ago saying we can't take any days off, and I need to go to the dentist, blah, blah. So they're like, yeah, you took this day off when no one was allowed to take the day off. So we felt like that was just, gross, insubordination and all this. Like, they were just using all this language. And so they brought in another teacher to finish out my classes and all of that. And so I went home that weekend because I think they gave me this information over a Friday. They said, let them know by Monday what I plan to do. And I tried to work really hard not to quit, because it goes back to wanting to finish strong and finish what I start. And I definitely did not. I love those kids so much. I did not want to leave them. It wasn't even in the middle of the school year. It was like May 13th or something. And the last day of school was like June, the beginning of June. So like 3 weeks were left in school, and I didn't want to leave them that way. And so they put me in a position where I still would have to answer to my boss and basically do whatever it is he asked me to do, even though I was working from home. And just the way he had treated me up to that point of just gaslighting me, everything that I had shared with him in confidence during our meetings where he was kind of pastoral with me, he took to the dean, and they were throwing it at me in the meeting and twisting it. So like I said, I recorded everything because I wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy. And yeah, so I talked to my now husband. We were, I don't even think we were engaged at the time. We were dating, and I talked to him, and I got counsel from different people, including my pastor, about what I should do. And after prayer, I ultimately decided to resign, and because I wasn't going to be allowed to go back to the school or anything anyway. So it was like the whole reason why I've been trying to finish is because of the students, even though earlier in the year, it was my plan to leave because they made me change the grades. And I keep saying, I don't like saying they made me, because I could have made a choice to not do it. So I suffered really badly with that. As far as the guilt is concerned, I felt really bad. I'm a part of this like wicked system. I'm changing grades. And I just felt so deflated and defeated as a Christian and all these things. But they made me write a letter and tell the parents that I had graded everything incorrectly. Just all these things. And so, yeah, because it was right before like mid-quarter or midterms or second semester. So it was the end of the first semester. So over that weekend, I was so just dejected that I was like, I got to quit. I can't go back. But then I thought, I don't want to quit in the middle of the school year. I got to stay for the kids. So I only stayed for the kids. But when they forced me out, I was like, you know what? I'll just go ahead and resign. So I resigned. The next day, I sent my resignation letter in, and then I reached out to HR, and I think HR knew what was going on from the sense of knowing that it was wrong. So they said, whatever, don't worry about anything. You're going to get all your pay, you know, blah, blah, blah. Someone packed up my things and sent it to me. So it's like people around the school knew better, but this little group of people here were plotting or something, all because of my not, I guess, I assume not allowing that student to get his way. They had nothing on me, except when they told you took the day off to go get dental work, so you got to go. I'm like, are you serious? So that's that experience. I know it was a lot.
Thank you so much for sharing. I know that everybody's going to want to know, did you consider suing them? Because that's what people always ask me about.
I did at the time. My friend, one of my good friends, she worked for I think it was the EEOC, and she was giving me all the intel about like, this is how you file a complaint and all this other stuff. I did think about the lawsuit thing, and I had the recordings, because the recordings back me up, because they were saying, and I have my computer there and I'm taking notes, but I'm like, I'm recording this whole thing, but I'm like, how are they just saying? They were just saying the craziest stuff. And I'm just like, are you serious right now? But when I asked them, can you guys, I actually said it in the recording, I said, can you tell me specifically in that first meeting, what is the issue? I feel like I'm running into a brick wall with everybody here, meaning the people in the room and then some of the parents. But when you talk to certain teachers and parents and even all of my students, I even told them about how all my students wrote these letters talking about how great of a teacher how much they enjoyed me, how much fun I was. And I said, I have letters from, they're like, they're kids, they don't know what they're talking about. So I'm like, so it doesn't matter when they're doing something positive in my favor, but if I say something that they, whatever. But so I did think about suing. The only reason I did not take legal action, and especially at that time, is because it was for the sake of Christ. That school has Christ's namesake on it. It's such and such Christian school, right? So I didn't want to be embroiled. I didn't want to be someone who was embroiled in some type of battle with a Christian school. I didn't feel right about that. That was number one. The other part was there were some really good teachers and parents that were there who had my back. Now, I feel like they could have been more vocal. If I'm honest, I think they could have been more, because what they do, and I experienced this with my blog too. If I write about something that people disagree with and I'm being dragged in the comment section and people are beating me up publicly, I'm being like lambasted and just beat down. And then I hope I used that word correctly, but I'm being beat down in public. And then you have these people that drop into your inbox like, hey, I just want you to know that I really enjoy it. Like, can you say that over there? Because I'm getting beat up right now. So that's what was happening at the school. I'm getting beat up by these parents. They were a small but very loud and very influential faction. So I believe that the other teachers were fearful, but there were teachers who were inviting me out for lunch and walks and things like that. Like, hey, for the record, XYZ, I know how you feel. Well, could you have said that when I was there? So myself and another teacher, the teacher who taught 8th grade English, we both ended up leaving at the same time. And she had pretty similar reasons why she left, because she was a pretty outspoken. And partly why I could not, my flesh was very tempted to go, is this racism? That little meme that had the butterflies and the guy was like, is this racist? Is this what this is? Because I don't know what this is, but she was a white teacher and she was going through the same thing I was going through. So I was like, okay, it's not racism, but I don't know what this is. And so members of my church at the time was like, if it's not that, it must be persecution, because it doesn't make any sense. It's just the way that everything spiraled out of control so quickly after that situation with the grades on, wanting the grades being broadcast on the board. It's like, it made no real sense. And that's probably people just listening to the story can probably realize, like, wait, what is she talking about? How did this happen? I don't know. I'm thinking the same thing, guys. I'm trying to figure it out. So all I can really think about now is that it was a spiritual battle. Especially going into a Christian school. I'm like, oh, I can talk about Jesus. I can talk about this. And I did enjoy sharing Christ, sharing the gospel. Of course, I did get in trouble with a parent. A student asked me about the age of accountability or something like that for kids. And I just shared with him that ultimately everybody has to repent and believe the gospel, and just share what the Bible said about, no man can enter heaven unless he's born again. And the mom was upset. It was like, you need to stop teaching the Bible. I'm like, at the Christian school, so so there is going to be, for those who might think going into a Christian school will get you just, and I'm not saying my experience is going to be everyone else's experience, but just know that be prepared for whatever spiritual attack that may come. But that became the worst working experience I ever had, because I worked late at night, early in the mornings, and everything that I did that whole school year revolved around that young man. Everything I could to prove to them that I'm not after your son. I don't have a problem with your son. Your son just doesn't do the work. And I'm doing everything I know to do. And I'm doing the whole recurring, reminders about a test that everybody else seems to be fine with keeping up with. But for him, the only thing I didn't do his backpack thing. I was like, I'm not, there's too much going on. But there was just so much they wanted me to do. Small group instruction during a time that, we didn't have the capacity for me to do that. So they eventually worked it out. And I had a decent relationship with the resource teacher there. So she saw me struggling. So she came in and she would pull him for me, which I'm thinking, that should be how it goes. Like, you're the resource teacher. Like, I'm dealing with a class of 26, 30 kids. I need help, But it just seemed like the moms with the seems like approval of the dad of the son were just after me, and they found any little small thing they could to nitpick about me. They did that, and the only way they quote unquote got me out of there is to claim that I went against policy by taking a day off that I was due to take off. I mean, it's my time. You can request that we not take time off, but you can't demand that people not take their leave. You know what I mean? Yeah. So all of that. So that was basically the situation. But yeah.
I have so many questions and thoughts, and you're right. Our situations do have so many parallels. The thing that I realized, like, after the fact is I think in these kind of environments, there's invisible unwritten rules and there's invisible unwritten tests.
Yes,
and you're just kind of like, la, 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 like happily doing life and not even realizing like, ooh, I'm failing this test, I'm failing this test, I'm failing this test. And it's one of those things that I think at the end of the day, it's a lot about like power and conformity. And these types of people sometimes really, really like yes men and yes women. They really like people that will treat them like they're some kind of royalty and that will bend over backwards to basically do whatever is asked. And I just remember so many things, like when you look back, in hindsight, you're like, oh, that makes sense. But I still remember this part of our orientation week where they were doing all of these scenarios, and this should have been like 1,000 red flags. But one of the scenarios was basically like, well, to give a little bit of context, essentially they would draw people's names out of a basket to answer these scenario questions. And it was like the welcome orientation week for teachers before the kids came. So the scenario basically was, okay, you are, getting ready for your day. You're having a test that's happening this morning. You've let the students know about it for 3 weeks and you've done everything you're supposed to do. And a mom calls you frantically and said, I'm just learning that my son has to have this test. He's not ready. Can you get him ready this morning? And the test question to the audience was, what are you supposed to do? Well, me having a normal frame of mind was thinking, your lack of preparation is not my emergency. Like, I will not be dropping everything that I'm doing to cater to your son. I am not his nanny. But like, literally, thank goodness they didn't call me, right? Because the person that called, they're like, oh, I would have dropped everything immediately and said, oh, ma'am, no problem. I'll make some time for him. Just bring him right in. And that should have been like the biggest
red flag. Yeah. That is the total. You are so right about that. That is the total expectation. We had a similar situation where, it's a Christian school, so they had to memorize scripture. And this is something that they knew about from the beginning of the school year. And I think it's like a quarterly scripture memorization, something that they do. So this student knew about the scripture he was supposed to memorize the whole, or the passage he was supposed to memorize the whole quarter. And then the day before he was due to go recite his verses, his parents sent an email to us and said, hey, can he be excused or get an extension on his scripture recitation because he had a baseball game yesterday and he got in really late and he's really tired. I'm like, what? Even still, he had all quarter. So what are we talking about? So it's just things like that, or taking these vacations out of the country, not even like, hey, I'm going to go to Disneyland real quick. They go out of the country, going on these like 3-hour tours and with Gilligan and the whole crew. And then like, hey, give you a day's notice. Like, I need all his work. And like, it's like stuff like that. And then you're just left to kind of look like, and if you don't have it, you look crazy. I remember having a situation like over Christmas break. It was the day before Christmas break. And so I'm from Atlanta. So I had driven down to Atlanta and I was to do online classes that day. I don't know if something had happened with COVID. I think there was an outbreak or something in our class. So I timed my drive with the classes that I was teaching, taught my classes on the road. I would stop, go to someone's Starbucks, do my classes, get back in the car, get on the road. So I get to Atlanta. I'm setting up in my hotel. I had one more class. I think I had one more class where I had something grades to input. Something required me to go online. I go online. I get an email from my boss and he's like, did you assign homework to the students? Which I had not, but again, another requirement. Do not assign any homework during Christmas break. You don't have to tell me twice because homework means I have to grade it. So of course I'm not going to do that to them. It's Christmas break. So now I'm being called to the carpet for assigning homework. I don't know what he's talking about. Some parent complained because she misread the again, those recurring now I'm having to put assignments in the system as recurring assignments. So they were reading a novel and the due date by when they were supposed to do some type of reading check was a recurring assignment, but it wasn't actually something they had to do during Christmas break. So basically I got in trouble because a mom misread the recurrence and said that I was assigning work. But it seemed like no matter what I did, what happened to vindicate me or what situation where it was proven that I was right, he already had a negative view of me in his head. And so it's just, he just kind of, I don't know, he just spoke down to me. And I remember sitting in a meeting, one of my last meetings with this is my principal, and he's talking to me like a therapist, and he's just like, oh yeah, so what you tend to do, you process out loud, and so I don't think you notice that you say the things that you say. So because he was claiming that I said something that I never said, and so now he's gaslighting me again. So it was just like, these people crazy. I don't know. It was the weirdest experience. I could not explain it other than the fact that it had to be spiritual warfare because it made absolutely no sense. But that experience taught me that, again, just because it's a private school, just because it's a Christian school, does not mean you're going to be immune to any issues. I ended up having to leave that job suddenly, which I did not appreciate. To this day, my students are confused about what happened. Parents are confused about what happened. The way things were being communicated sounded like I did this egregious thing. There was something where my principal, after he did my performance review, the one he did in, I think it was like April, and he gave me this scathing review out of nowhere, and without any opportunity to like do a performance plan or go to professional development, nothing. It was just like, you're a bad teacher. Like, oh well, what is this in April? I think he did that to cover his tracks about why I didn't get a contract. That's my thought. So get this crazy review, and I'm trying to figure out how to please these people, because I just feel like no matter what I do, I'm getting everything wrong. But he what am I trying to say? He's telling me that I'm processing things out loud. I don't know what I said, but he claimed that I said something that I didn't say. I don't know what that was. But one thing that he was saying is that the students shared with their parents that, during the performance review, he said he would like me to, for my students to be totally quiet in the classroom, which that's not my style. That's not my kids don't have to be 100% quiet for me to have classroom management. I'm fine with them chatting. It's fine with me. But when I went to my kids to let them know that he shared that with me, I was like, yeah, Mr. Such and Such would like you guys to be more quiet, be quiet when you're working, I'm letting them know that it's coming from him, because I wanted them to know that an authority figure has made a new, like, not to be funny, like Jesus, like a new command I give to you. He's given a new directive. It is not coming from me per se, because it looks weird. I can't explain it because it's not coming from me. But on the authority of this individual, we're going to go ahead and do it. So the kids were sharing that with their families. The families went back to him. It was a lot of people going to administration and not coming to the teachers. I don't know what that was about. They went straight to the administration about that. And I don't know why that was a big deal to go to him for anyway, but they went to him. He then calls me to his office, and he's like, you are sharing adult conversations with students. I'm like, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about? You threw me under the bus. If I'm asking you to do something, you should just asking you to have your students do something. You should just have your students do it without mentioning me. And I'm thinking, but I need them to know that this is not coming from me, because I've been allowing them to do XYZ this whole school year. So it looks weird all of a sudden around April, early May, they have to do this new random thing. But because you have requested it, I want them to know it's coming from a higher authority within the institution so that they would, comply. But he looked at it as I was throwing him under the bus. I don't know why, but he looked at it as I was throwing him under the bus, and he characterized it as I shared adult conversations with children or with students. That wording bothered me on so many levels. This is someone who never emailed me about like much of anything, wanted to have a phone call or in-person meeting about everything else. But on this thing, he wants to email me and say, you've been having sharing adult conversations with students. I said, look, for posterity purposes, let's be clear about what I shared with the students, because I don't want someone reading an email years from now saying, oh, this teacher shared adult. That sounds so salacious to me. So I was like, no, what is clear is that I told them that now you want them to be quiet. And so there was nothing, like I said, there was nothing they had on me. They just had to find little things here and there. But it was, that experience was just weird.
Really glad that you're telling this, because I think a lot of people really don't believe things like this happen, and their mindset is, oh, it had to be you. Well, what did you do? And I love that you can really show the threads of like, no, literally there is this one little thing that wasn't even a big deal. And you showed how all these people that have no business getting in it get linked in, and it becomes a web, then it becomes a caricature, then it becomes really a witch hunt. Like, what can we find that she's doing wrong? And then people get invested in it. It's almost like reality TV show where they're like, oh, like, and people feel important and they feel like they're on the inside. And then there's kind of these helpless bystanders that are just like, I didn't know that this is wrong, but I don't want to be on the witch hunt list of these crazy ladies. And
I mean, I even lost a tutoring opportunity. I was tutoring one of the students. The mom reached out to me because I was a tutor as well before coming to the school. So the mom knew that. She reached out to me saying, hey, you're her English teacher. They love me. That's why I was like, that's what made my experience there so weird, because it was like the best of times and the worst of times at the same time. And it's like, how did that even happen? Especially before that situation with, put my grade on the screen happened. I'm getting all these like glowing reviews. Like, we heard what you talked about during devotional. Oh, it's so amazing. We heard what you talked about during chapel. It's so amazing. We love that we have a teacher who knows her Bible and all these things. And all of a sudden it's just like, you don't know how to teach. You teach Title I kids. It's like, wait, what? One thing I did challenge them on, though, is that I felt like the kids, they had the capacity to take on more when it came to their learning, as far as just being more critical thinkers, being more analytical. They could do it. They were just learning. They were also sixth graders, and that's a transition year. Up to fifth grade, your parents are getting these packets, of what you've been doing in school and all that. This is the first year where you got a locker, you're changing classes. Of course, they couldn't do all that because of COVID, but that was the intent of that year. And so they had a little bit more autonomy. They're expected to be a little bit more responsible for their work, writing things down in their agendas. And it's like the parents didn't want to let go. And so as I'm like, no, and I don't want to be that teacher that's like, I know better, than the parent. But at the same time, as far as the teacher in my classroom, yes, I do, like that's the whole point, so. And if you don't believe so, why are you not homeschooling? That's something I never understood with the moms who were at home. I mean, do what you do. That's your business. But if you're going to send your child to an institution for 8 hours a day and you don't trust their teachers, what are you really doing with your life? Like, how does that even make sense? Like, if you're going to do that, or at least volunteer, do something. Like, why are you on the sidelines complaining about a C when this student has grown in this area? A C can be celebrated for this particular area. I mean, of course, I want my students to be perfect A, B students. Yeah, of course. But if they're showing growth and a C is better than what they did before, I think that's something to be celebrated. A young man made a B on an exam where he had to give this kind of like this summary of, because it was language arts. I taught 2 sections of language arts where 3 parts. Writing, they separated. They separated that. I can't talk. They separated it out. So it was writing as one class, and then I had to do grammar, usage, punctuation, all that as a separate class. And then I did another class for reading. And so they, for the reading class, they had to read these novels, things that were on grade level that they had to go back and do like a reflection on, and sometimes an argumentative essay about why they believe one character is this person and that. And the parents were not having it. They're like, look, we need you to let them do some matching. We need some matching and some fill in the blanks. And I was like, And I actually had a student actually say that. She said, I've been at this school since I was in first grade, and this is the first time that I have been challenged like this, and this is the first time I've actually understood what's going on in the Bible. I thought that was pretty dope. Her mom was pretty chill too. But yeah, for the sake of those things regarding, like, you know, Christ's namesake being on the school, and there were some decent teachers and parents that were involved that I didn't want to bring down. And then also my students. I'm only sharing this now publicly because those students are matriculating out of that school. So, you know, by the time this even gets out, they're done. I just didn't want to affect their time there, because it didn't have to be all negative. I think a lot of the negativity that I experienced was something specific for people with me, as opposed to it being something that is ingrained in every Christian school or whatnot. But I do think there was a temptation for administrators to bow the knee to the parents, because they're and my boss admitted this, because I said, you guys are treating them like they're customers. And he says, you know what? You're right. They are customers. That's what he told me. So they do see these families as customers. They see these kids as numbers. So when it comes to students who are failing or who could be challenged a little bit more, as long as as long as there's A's and B's in your grade book, they don't really care what you're really doing, what you're really teaching. But the second that someone made a C or an A student made a B, clearly I'm not an effective teacher. I didn't explain something correctly. They don't take any accountability or anything into account about how a child could just be a child and not want to do homework one night, would prefer to play video games, would prefer to go play baseball or whatever the case may be. They didn't take any of that into account. Is if they fail, it's your fault, right? And to some extent, as a teacher, you do take that on. Now, if I'm teaching something that is pretty straightforward in my head, but most of my kids fail, then I'm going to reteach, you know. But if I have, in my case with the administrator's son, everybody else is doing just fine, and he's over here like busting out D's and F's, and it's like, what are you doing for him though? I'm like, the same thing I do for all the other students. Like, is there something special other than whatever he needs on his you know, if there's an academic plan or everything or anything for him, other than that, what else can I do? The student is also responsible. He has to be motivated. He has to want to do the work. And that's just not where he was at. So I don't know. They wanted me to be a miracle worker and with him. And I just don't understand. But yeah, so, you know.
Do you think that the kid caught on to what was going on and milked it for all it's worth? Because so many people don't believe me when I talk about how manipulative kids can be. They're like, oh no. Yeah. And I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I brought that up in my meeting with them. In the 2 meetings that I recorded with them, I was talking about that. And they were like, well, he's just a kid. He's just a kid. All of a sudden he became this innocent, defenseless kid that can't think of anything. His brain can't, which is funny to me because these students, and, you know, of course, my teaching experience is, you know, I have issues that I've had in classrooms outside of even that experience. But what I've seen with students, especially in the way that discipline is handled now, or just the general culture of the schools now, is that the kids can do no wrong. If they're misbehaving, you did something incorrect. And when you try to bring it up to them, like, hey, the kids probably plotted this, or they probably did, they can't think. A child? Thinking a child? I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't know, but they kept doing that during the meeting. He's a child. He's a child. Da, da, da. I'm like, no, this little boy is manipulating this whole operation. Like, he's running this whole operation. You guys don't even know it. I brought up the fact that they did this summer reading program that somehow landed on my desk because I wasn't even there at the time, but because I was the new language arts teacher, I was responsible for grading all these summer projects, and it was a lot. So I'm reading, and I remember I used their summer projects to place them in writing groups. Okay, he's a strong writer. She's a strong writer. Okay, the student needs a little bit of help. You know, so I put him in a high group for writers because his essay, his book report, I should say, was so well written, only to get in my class, and not only is his writing style different, his handwriting is different, you know. So when you're trying to explain that to them, it's like, oh, he's just a child. He's just a child. And in some respects, yes, that's true. He's just a child. But there's also parental accountability. The parents were never gonna take accountability for him in the things he did. Do you believe he's a D student? Yes, I do. He's an F student, but I'm not saying that to be rude. This is a fact. And if we can't diagnose the issue, we can't actually treat it. So everyone wants to get around saying, hey, you have cancer. They're just like, oh, I mean, your teeth are falling out, your hair is falling out, you're losing weight. But hey, I mean, you know, you're down to 165. That looks good on you. I mean, it's like everyone's ignoring all the signs and just trying to find a positive in the fact that you're losing weight and hair and teeth, you know. And it's like, but what's really going on? They don't want to diagnose or actually call out the issue for whatever reason. That remains to be, I still don't know what that's about.
To clarify, did the summer project, was his mom that did that for him, and that's why it was so good?
That I'm not sure. But the homework assignment that he had some missing homework for me, and then he brought it all in one day, and everything was well put together, written. A lot of things were wrong, which was another funny thing because it was like, Mom, come on now. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. But in either case, it just wasn't his handwriting and all that. So I was just like, oh, okay. He's like, I didn't do. My mom did that. That's what he said. My mom did that. And so I'm like, okay, because I was asking him like, hey, what about this? This was incorrect. You know, handwriting. Like, my mom did that. My mom did that. So I was like, okay. So when I tell my boss, he's like, they just say things. Kids just say things. Like, okay, but I don't know. But it's just, there's just some way, the way that I believe the students were communicating things to their parents, and then the way that the parents took it, and it just became like this whole, like, you had to have done something wrong. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the cultural thing, that it could have been a misunderstanding of culture. Because if my students misbehave in my classroom, I'm calling them out. Excuse me, what are you doing? Can you have a seat? That's how I'm fine with saying that's how I speak to my students when they're out of order. I'm not going to be, disrespectful or unprofessional in the sense of saying something rude or, demoralizing or anything like that. But like, as that auntie mama figure or whatever, and it could be, like I said, a cultural thing that I'm used to. But when kids get out of line, you're like, excuse me, what are you doing? So I think some of that had aspects in it, because my boss in that meeting we had, they were like, yeah, the kids say that you're yelling at them. I'm like, the kids? Which kids? What are you talking about? Like, where are you guys getting this from? So if there was a excuse me kind of one, maybe that, I don't know. I still to this day I cannot definitively say this is the reason they're asking me to resign, and I'm asking them why, and they're not giving me an answer up until I go to the dentist, and it's like, oh yeah, it's because you went to the dentist. It's like, what, really? So I still don't know, but I had no answers for the parents. I ended up having to leave the kids high and dry. I was in the middle of grading a major project for them. No one knew about that. It's like so much was going on, and kids they were actually having, some of their parents were reaching out to me because, like I said, I was tutoring as well. So they had my personal email, and they would say, hey, we just want to know what's going on. And I was still confused. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what would be proper to say. I didn't know, because I was at one point thinking about like, hey, I'm going to have to take legal action. I didn't know what would be appropriate to say from a legal standpoint. So I'm like, I don't know what just happened. I just know that they're telling me that I can't come back to the school, but I can still work for the school from home and just finish out my duties, but I wouldn't be able to interact with the kids. And so even that just looked very, what's the word? It just looked suspicious. Yeah, it looked very suspicious, And so I ended up losing one of the tutoring opportunities, because the mom, I think she tried, because she continued to correspond with me, and she continued to try to set new dates to meet with her daughter over the summer. But I think she just probably was like, you know what, it's just too much. And I, from a parent standpoint, I can totally understand why she did that. But on my end, I'm like, girl, I don't even know. Like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything illegal, immoral, nothing. It was just, they just did not like me because of this one student, and it just kind of turned into something else. But they really did try to allow it to creep in with other parents, where every now and then a parent will raise up and say, hey, you did XYZ, and I would defend myself. But they were reasonable, so they would come back down. But that one faction was pretty consistent the whole school year.
I think your story also illustrates kind of the culture of shame and silence that can be in a lot of private schools, because it's almost like they target and vilify people, and the way they spin the narrative, there's just like this shroud of mystery, and they know that you can't say anything. Mm-hmm. They know that you can't tell what's going on. And when it's like administration that's a part of, the scheming, then they know that you can't really talk about that to other people. So it's almost like they put you in a box in like a prison. And it just, the in part of your story, like how the last, month or so went, just even reminded me of my experience, because basically the administrator in my case made me take every single final exam to her so she could double check my grading to make sure that I didn't like mess up somebody's grades to retaliate. And it was just so humiliating.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
The character shame that they put on you. It's like, you think I'm a lying monster that's devious. Like, it's so horrible. And it's just, at least for me, it's like that really set on me, just that feeling. It's like having slime thrown all over you. Yeah. Did you wrestle with that at all?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because like I said, I found your channel through the time that I was experiencing all of this. And I feel like since time has passed, I've forgotten some of like the key details. I hope that's because my heart has forgiven everyone involved, you know. But when you brought up a good point, because that my principal did do that to me, and I was the only person he did that to. He went back, and from like a certain point onward, he said that he was basically requiring me to send him all of my lesson plans. The email that I had gotten, I thought he wanted me to send a particular lesson plan. But in the meeting that we had, the first one that I recorded, he was like, you never sent me your lesson plans. I'm like, what are you talking about? So apparently he wanted me to send all of my lesson plans ahead of time so he can look at them just to make sure everything was on the up and up. And so during that meeting, I'm like, wait, was this something that you were asking of all the teachers, or was it just me? And so his whole thing is like, you know, I was giving you a chance after chance. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So it's like two different conversations were happening. So like I said, we would have these one-on-one, because everything he wanted to talk about was always had to be in person or over the phone. He would never write anything out unless it appeared to be incriminating for me. But he wanted to have these in-person meetings. And in the beginning, I thought it was because he cared for me as a teacher. And I'm like, oh, I'm at this Christian school, and this guy is really taking the time to really understand how I feel. And he's doing the whole therapist thing. Like, how did that make you feel? And what did you, and I'm looking like, yeah, I just walk out of here every day feeling like a failure. And he totally threw that in my face in the meeting. I was like, you're not supposed to, you know, because you do feel demoralized, and you're in a situation where you're doing everything you can to support the student. And I'm telling him, and I was very transparent with him. I was like, I feel like there's so much going on with this student that I don't think that I have any recourse, because if I come to you, you're his subordinate, you know, and then he's like second in charge. Like, who do I really talk to? And I'm telling him all this stuff only for him to this whole time was feeding all this stuff to the dean. And then when I go to the dean, and myself and my principal were in the meeting, and we're talking to the dean, and the dean is like, I said, well, can I, because the Bible talks about, you know, the first person has their case, but then until you hear the next, I'm quoting it all wrong, but y'all know what I'm talking about, until you basically hear the other side. And so I was like, well, what about the other side? He tells me, I've heard everything I need to hear. Mr. Such and Such has been telling me the whole time what you've been doing, so you don't have to tell me anything. That's what he tells me in the meeting. Again, it is recorded. I have to be very clear about that part, because I'm like, I don't want anyone saying that I'm making this up, or that, because for a minute I really thought I was crazy, because I'm like, these people are saying XYZ to me, but this is what I remember, you know. So I had to record the meeting, because I didn't want there to be a situation later where they're saying they said something and are making me feel like I've felt the way I felt, you know, because I was sensitive. They tried to make that a thing too. You're very sensitive. And I'm like, I'm sharing these, I'm transparent with you because you are a pastor and you're my boss at a Christian school. So that level of, you know, from a professional standpoint, I would never cry at work. That's one thing I've just learned, like, just don't cry at work. Don't show any weakness, because people don't do right. People will use it against you. But I'm thinking, oh, this is a Christian family. So I'm telling this guy how I feel. I'm crying in his office and all this stuff. And he's using all of that. But even you said you don't feel like an effective teacher. Sir. I'm like,
you know exactly what you're talking about.
Because I don't feel, because I've done everything I'm supposed to do, and you guys are still telling me that I'm doing something wrong, not because I actually believe I'm an ineffective teacher. I think that. And with that said, like I said before, I enjoy teaching, and, you know, it's not humble to pat yourself on the back, but I think at some point as human beings, we should have a general idea of what we're good at, or what we can do well. And I think I am a pretty effective communicator when it comes to teaching concepts to my students. I hear a lot of those, which I love, those, I get that a lot. The issue is the teacher part, being the teacher part. So I love teaching. I don't like being a teacher. I don't like all the extra baggage that they're giving you, all the weighing down of the you know, paperwork you got to do. Right now I have about like 6 different what do you call those things? Evaluations that I'm being asked to fill out for one student. And these evaluations aren't short, you know, so it's like all these little things that they want you to do. But then you have these PDs for some reason, or PDs or staff meetings, which for some reason always neglect to talk about things you actually need to know. Because when I'm in, all of a sudden, like 2 days later, you get this email about something that you got to do like right away. And, we got to test the kids on XYZ. Like, wait, why didn't we talk about this test in the staff meeting 2 days ago? You know, why didn't you guys give us everything we needed about that during the staff meeting? Instead, we're talking about, you know, who traveled the farthest, or, you know, to get to work, and putting us in groups and talking about, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. The culture in education is like insanity. I am kind of curious with this kid. Did he try to pull his stunts with other teachers, or do you think he targeted you because you were new and you were different and he saw his parents feeding into it?
I think that's a good question. I don't know what he did before I came along, but I know that it seemed like all the teachers there were on code. Like everybody had an understanding, because even one of the teachers who I really respect and love and formed a really good relationship with, even she ended up having him the following year. And it's just like, I'm waiting for, I mean, of course she can't share anything with me about what's going on, but I'm still like, hello, what's going on, you know? So I feel like everybody knows the drill. And that particular teacher did share with me that when she first got there, she was going against the grain and getting into trouble a lot. And she just learned to just, you know what, let me just go mind my business. So that system just basically starts to beat you down. So as far as what he did with previous teachers, I don't know. I think, I will say this. He tried me, as they will say, but I don't think he realizes what he was doing. I think he was just, he did realize what he was doing, but I don't think he realized it was going to turn into what it turned into. I think by the time his parents got involved, and of course he's going to save his own hide, he's going to tell them whatever makes him sound like the victim or the good guy. He tells his dad that all I wanted was to see my grade. You are not interested in your grades, and you know it. Stop playing these games. But all I wanted was to see my grade, and she wouldn't show me my grade. All I said was, you would if my dad were here. I'm like, that is not how that went down. But yeah, he had a really weird way of speaking. I remember once we had gotten these shirt orders or whatnot for a service day or something. And so I'm distributing the shirts and I call his name. And I give him what I can't remember if I gave him the shirt. Oh, he snatched it. That's what it was. I gave him a shirt, he snatched it. And I said, can I have that back? Because we're gonna have to do this again, because that doesn't work for me. So he gives me the shirt back, but he does it in a way where he kind of like drops it before it really reaches my hand. So this kid was like off the chain. So I was like, well, if you're not picking it up, then I'm not picking it up. So we just let the shirt stay on the floor, because I'm like, and then he goes, geez, you can tell you don't have children. That's what he says to me. So I'm thinking to myself, this sounds like something your parents are saying at home. You know what I mean? Yeah. So things like that, because it was clear, because I'm at a Christian school. Most of the people there were married, had kids. Most of the teachers working there were mothers of the students that were there. So I was kind of the odd man out coming in. But my coworker, she was also single, with no children, but she was there the previous year. So I don't know how that all worked together, but I just thought that was really interesting. But yeah, he goes, yeah, you could tell. You could tell you have no children. He was very rude. And so I ended up going home for Christmas break. And I, for some reason, I'm a masochist, and I check my work email for whatever reason. So I check my work email. I get an email from the dad asking about his shirt. Now I have my shirt so that when I get back, I can wear it. So I left it at school. Any type of paraphernalia the school gives me, I generally leave it at school so I can remember to use it when I need to. So I left my shirt in my closet, in my resource closet in my classroom. And the dad is sending me an email like, hey, have you seen such and such a shirt? He's saying you had it last. I was like, no, he left it on the floor. And maybe another student picked it up. I'm not sure, because I was like, you're not gonna snatch things from me, and you're not gonna just drop it when I'm asking you to give it back. Because I was like, we're gonna just redo this so you can know how to take things from an adult. And he I don't know what happened. I just know that the wife turns around and emails me, don't worry about it, we got the shirt, we went into your closet and got it. It's like, wait, yes. It was my shirt. I mean, I'm not gonna make a big deal about the shirt, but I mean, y'all just going to my classroom, going to I was like, wow, these very, very audacious. But I think in the position that they were in, who can stop them? Who gonna, like Sheree says on Housewives, who can check them, boo? You're like, who? What was that about? I don't know, but just a lot of just undermining. They kept moving the needle about, or moving the line about what I should do in a certain situation. So apparently when he misbehaved in my class and acted out, and I took him to his father, I got that wrong, because his father is not his father at work. His father is the assistant dean of students. I should have taken him to the principal. Okay, so I'll remember that next time. So then I'll take him to the principal, or tell the principal something. You should have informed his father. I'm just like, I give up. I don't know what to do at this point. But I kept getting it wrong. No matter what I did it wrong. I requested a meeting again on the strength of it being a Christian school. Hey, can we sit down and talk this through? I think there's been a misunderstanding. I don't want there to be, I want all hearts and minds are clear. I don't want there to be any issues going forward. And I'm quoting Matthew 18. I'm saying all these things, and I get no response. And then for a while, and then by the time I do get a response, Dad is just like, I just want to make sure that when XYZ happens, you do XYZ. So I'm thinking like, so the opportunity to talk things through, to make sure we're all clear on whatever we're expecting from each other. I'm sending them these like glowing reviews. Any good thing this boy does in class, he blinked. Oh my gosh, he blinked today, and he blinked the best blink. And I want y'all to know that he blinked so well. Like, I'm doing all these things to show them, like, look, I am an advocate for your son, but he cannot be disrespectful in my class. He can't be disruptive in my class. And I want him to put forth effort just like everybody else does. But that's just not what I was getting. They wanted me to give him special treatment. And just the whole nine. But it's just, now my co-teacher, she was that person. She would fall in line. She would do, but again, she was a second year teacher. So there's something about when you first become a teacher, you just like, I think a first time parent, like you just do all the good, right stuff, if you will, all the things that the books say you're supposed to do. And you're going to burn out eventually, but you don't know that yet. And so she's staying up late, cutting out, who knows, letters or something. And she's doing all those things. And I'm not saying it's not something that a teacher should do or could do or must do. I'm just saying that there are certain things you start to realize you have to prioritize, and like, what makes sense? Can I go to teacher, pay teacher, and get a few resources here? Can I, so I'm thinking about that. And so because she did that, which by the way, she no longer works at the school. She's left teaching.
Wow.
By the way. I was like, oh, I have my list. She's no longer teaching. So it's like she probably ended up hitting the same wall that I hit, because I know she was telling me about her experience before she came to that school, that she had she was in school. She did an internship at a public school, and she said, I cried every day. Those kids make me cry every day. And I'm thinking to her, you're crying in front of those kids? You're gonna let them do that to you? Are you serious? But so I think she went to the Christian school expecting something as well. But to be honest, I don't know what made her leave, but I just know she's no longer a teacher. So it's just interesting how everything ended up working out. We're in the same boat, but it's just, I don't know.
Well, I'm curious, like, how, and this will probably be the last question, because we could talk about this all day, but I'm just curious, like, how did you work through the emotions? Because at least in my case, like, even like 7 years later, I don't know if it's that many years later, I think it is, like, I would still have like nightmares about being in that environment, and I've still like really felt really hurt about it when I stopped to think about it. And like, I tried not to drive through that town, and it like really messed with me. So like, what was your process like in like navigating that and kind of getting over it? And did it affect you going into your next teaching role?
That is a excellent question. To be honest with you, I think that experience is a lot of what has led me to the decision to leave teaching. Because I felt like if I cannot go to a Christian school and get peace, in my teaching, then I don't know where else I can go. I mean, of course, I've taught an additional few years after that experience, but with everything else going on in other schools, just realizing that I can't. Okay, I'll put it this way. We know, at least from my experience, public schools, that's when I'm dealing with a lot of student behaviors in public schools. That's been my experience. In private schools, it's more the parents and the administrators. Public schools with the administrators as well, when you're not really getting support. But I ran or fled to a Christian school thinking, okay, this is going to be a break from all of that. And so I remember writing, with everything I've gone through this year, I would much rather go back to a troubled school, because at least I know those kids are troubled. You know what I mean? At least I know why they're behaving the way they're behaving. This was just gross. You know what I mean? So, but when I began to realize that I have that mindset about it all, I was like, it's good for me to get out of the classroom, because I could see myself becoming cynical. I could see myself becoming distrustful or even fearful of sharing feedback on a student, whether I'm getting pushback from the parent or the administrators. I'm seeing that there's really not a lot of hope for me to be the kind of teacher that I want to be, even as when I'm in the classroom. If it's just a time for, because it seems like there's a time in the school year where administrators suddenly decide to pop up and they bring like 20 people in your room at the same time unannounced, and you're like, what is this about? You know, maybe some funding is coming through, I don't know. But when those times are not happening, there's so much growth and just good stuff going on in the classroom, and you're just connecting with your kids and giving them the content and the skills that they need, and everybody's happy. But when you have all these external factors telling you, well, you got to do this, you got to move here, you got to go left, you got to go right, it can get overwhelming. And so when I realized that if I cannot go to a Christian school and get the solace I need, and someone said, well, that was just your experience at that school. Well, there were some things I saw at the Christian school that I believe would apply to most of these schools. And if it's a private school and the parents tend to be, not saying this is always the case, but they tend to be more entitled than other parents. Now, the other parents might be more off, maybe more hands off. So in the quote unquote Title I schools, you may have trouble reaching parents as much as you would, maybe because they're working. I mean, I definitely came from a family or background where my mom was working all the time. So if you're looking for my mom at an award ceremony, she's not there, and it's okay. I got this award, Mom. I mean, that's the way I was as a kid. But so when you're wanting the parents to be involved in all that in the Title I schools, it's like, it's just, for me, because I kind of understood the context behind why those things were happening. For me, it was easier to just go back to it. Whereas at the Christian school, I just had, like I said in the beginning, I had these high expectations only for it to be deflated, and then for the parents to be very entitled and just kind of look at you like you're crazy when you push back. Like, wait, are you talking back to me? I pay your salary. I pay, you work for me. That's very much that attitude. So it took me a while to realize that I was feeling this way, but I just knew that I went back to teaching Title I, so I wasn't a classroom teacher anymore. So I got away from administrators a little bit for a little while, but just seeing how just the kids are allowed to behave and things like that, I was like, you know what? And if I can't say anything about that, if I can't affect change like I thought this field was going to allow me to do, then why am I even here? So in my current job, I share the gospel, I teach my algebra courses, I grade my papers home. Like, that's, you know, I mean, I talk to some of my colleagues, of course, but, you know, but I just try to stay in my lane. I don't go above and beyond in terms of going to every school function and, you know, just all those things that I would have like gotten so much excitement about doing in the very beginning or in the earlier years. I no longer feel connected in that way. And I can acknowledge that there may be some unforgiveness or bitterness that's still there. Like I said earlier, I would hope that because I've forgotten a lot of or you have to say something to jog my memory of things that happened. So I would hope that that's forgiveness and not just me pushing it down. You know, maybe I need teacher therapy, you know, but but knowing that happened, I think that was like, I was done after that. I was done in. So I think for me, it's best for me to just get on up out the classroom. I think I'm still in a healing process, because just in getting ready to talk to you today, preparing for today, I just went back and I looked at some things and I was just like, oh. So I think I still feel that hurt, that betrayal. It feels like betrayal. And it's on multiple levels. It's like these trusted colleagues and families that you were working with, but then also the fact that they were supposed to be, or they profess to be, your brothers and sisters in Christ. That was really hard. And I'm a big, you know, with my blog, I talk about faith and pop culture. And sometimes I hear people who don't go to church anymore complain about their experience with Christians or experience at the church and things like that. And I always say, well, you follow Christ, not those Christians. So just find another church. So someone could argue, well, that's what you say in your blog, so why not just find another Christian school? Well, the reality is I don't want to teach anymore at all. Like, I don't want to do that, because because it's not the teaching per se, it's the being a teacher. So, you know, probably tutor or something like that after all of this. But I just don't want to be in a situation where I'm made to feel like I'm not giving my best. I'm not saying that I cannot receive feedback and suggestions for improvement, But if I actually make those improvements or actually take you up on your suggestions and you move the line, I can't do that.
Amen and amen. So much. This has been really good. And I'm still just like shocked at how similar our stories are. I bet if we had 5 hours, we could go like line by line. Amazing. But I hope that people find this that need it, because I do think, especially like as Christian people, we don't want to talk about negative experiences sometimes that we have, whether it's the church or Christian schools. But I think it's really healthy because people need to be accountable. They need to know what could happen. And we just have to continue to like speak the truth in love and say, hey, like what happened to us is wrong. This is not how a Christian organization should be. This is not who we're called to be, and we can all do better. And we can just only hope that the people involved in all of these parties are doing better things now and are being nicer people now.
Yeah. I hope so too. I did have a pretty positive outcome though. One of my students, she didn't know that she could write. She didn't think that she was, I don't even think it was a matter of not thinking that she was a good writer. She just never explored the fact that she liked writing. And I would read her essays and I kept giving her feedback, like, you're a really good writer. You're a really good writer. And so that inspired her to go on, and she wrote a little novel. It was so cute. She wrote a book, and her mom emailed me towards the end of last school year, because they actually left the school. That was another reason why I felt comfortable sharing publicly about my experience, because, you know, that student which was one of my favorites, her family's no longer at the school. So because I just didn't want them to feel betrayed, because I'm like, oh, talking about your experience here, you know. But she went on and won some writers award or something like that. So she's still writing, she's still doing really well. So it's those moments as a teacher that when you hear that you made some type of an impact in a student's life, and it's long term, and it's of course definitely positive, it's those things. And so I think I'm going to be like Seinfeld and just kind of like leave on a high note. Like, I'm going to take that and go, okay, great. So I hope, and I told her, you know, when I was grading her papers, like, don't forget me. You become this popular, you know, famous writer. Like, don't forget, give me a dedication in your book or something like that. But, so I'll be looking forward to that. But I mean, so that would be some of the positives. Like, overall, from my experience, my teachers, my students have been such a blessing. They've been so much fun to work with. There's definitely grades that I prefer over others, which is probably around the 5th or 6th grade. They're so fun. But because there's other entities involved, and while I do think parents should be involved at the Christian school or the private school, the parents tend to be more helicoptery, and their child can do no wrong, and you work for them, and you're treated more as the help than you are the professional and the person who actually spent the time to, whether it's through actually going to college and getting your degree in education, or going through professional development and getting a certificate, whatever the case may be. All of that is undermined because you are teaching their kids, and especially because those schools tend to pay very little. And it's not about the pay. At least it wasn't for me, because I definitely took about a 50% pay cut to go there, because I was like, I did. Wow. From contracting to working at that school, I definitely cut my salary in half. But I thought, oh, the piece I'm gonna get, and I gotta talk about Jesus, you know. But that would be another benefit. I got to talk about Jesus a lot. Okay, of course, some people had issues with, you know, the things I shared, which was just basically what was in the Bible, but I did appreciate that. So having the opportunity to impart Christ, share Christ with my students over these years has been a blessing. So on that note, I can leave with a clear conscience, especially because by God's grace, I was able to finish out this school year. So I'm going to finish up. I have one more week. We have finals, and get my grades in, and I'm out of there. So,
well, this was so good. Thank you. And can you tell us again where we can find you?
Of course. You can find me at truthandfire.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Veriteetfeu. The spelling is in this little lower third here, if you will. Also on Twitter at Veriteetfeu.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And audience, thank you for watching. If you want to interview with me, just email me and let me know. And I'm sure that she would love for you to say hi to her whenever you get a chance. So we'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.